going to try to be positive on this bonus edition of the Hockey Inside Out show. What is your all-time favorite Canadiens moment since you've been following, or I guess in Rick's case, playing or coaching for the Montreal Canadiens? Rick, actually, you can start with your experience. What's your favorite moment? I have a pretty good guess.
Yeah, well, 1986, that whole Stanley Cup run.
There it is.
Sure. It's pretty obvious when we look back at the 2 months that we were locked in the hotel, basically, being challenged in a lot of ways. But I just go back to the game in Calgary when I received the puck in the third period from David Maley, and here I see Joey Mullen coming out to me. It's a 2-1 hockey game, coming out to me to challenge me at the blue line. And for whatever reason, the brain cramp that I had at that time told me to deke him. And thank goodness it was the right move, because I ended up shooting exactly where I planned on shooting and scoring a goal. And we went on to win the famous 1986 Stanley Cup. And obviously great souvenirs and great memories. And after those beautiful years with the Washington Capitals, to get my promotion to the Montreal Canadiens and win the ultimate goal of a Stanley Cup doesn't get any better.
Well, it's hard to follow that up with what my favorite memory is. But mine was in 2008 when the Canadiens were down by 5 goals to the New York Rangers, and they were able to come back in the game. The game was at the Bell Center. The Habs tied it up. The game went into a shootout, and who scored the game winner? Saku Koivu. And to me, that was the best game. I remember watching it. It was spring break. We all were ready to turn off the TV, and then they started scoring, and they made it one of the most entertaining hockey games to watch.
Yeah, it's such a tough question. As I've mentioned, I think I mentioned before on the show, when I was in high school, 5 years, the Habs won 4 Stanley Cups. So there was so many great memories from back then. But my favorite story, I guess, Rick Green lifting the Stanley Cup in 86, of course, is obviously right up at the top of the list. But one of my favorite stories in 86, my favorite player to watch was Brian Skrudland. I love Brian Skrudland. He competed so hard, heart and soul. I love the guy. So that time, 87, I'm like 23 years old. And my buddy and I go to the Stanley Cup parade, and it was, I don't know if I've told the story before on this show, but it's about 100 degrees. Rick would remember. The players are all in convertibles, and Brian Skrudland's on the back of a convertible, and he's got glasses on, and he looks more like a school teacher or a professor than he does a hockey player. So he gets out of the car, and he starts walking through the crowd, and nobody recognizes him. So my buddy and I, where's he going? So we sort of follow him, and he goes into a tavern on St. Catherine Street. And he's talking with the barman or whatever, and he's saying, I'm dying of thirst. It's hot. I left my wallet back at the Forum. Can you just give me a beer and I'll come back and pay you later? And the guy's like, give me a break. Take a hike, buddy. So my friend goes up and says, you're Brian Skrudland, aren't you? And he goes, yeah. He says, we'll buy you a beer, but you got to sit here and drink it with us. So we said, okay. So we ordered 3 quarts. We sat down. Skrudland had the beer with us. He got up. He said, thanks, guys. And he walked back through the crowd, and he got back up on the convertible, and away he went on the way. So that's sort of for a personal story that sticks out on me, and I'll always remember that. And I interviewed Brian years later, and I mentioned to him, do you remember that time? And he says, that was you guys? And I went, yeah, that was
to follow up a little bit on that, Stu, I remember, post parade times when we used to go out. Imagine that. We went out to the bars and the restaurants, and no matter where we went, we could not buy anything. We could not, buy a meal. We could not buy a beer. The people were just, like I said, it all ties into that souvenir that I touched on with, once in a lifetime experience. Yes, I only got one, but I'll tell you what, to win it in the city of Montreal with what we had as a following and the people, nothing will match that one.
The days before cell phones, right, Rick? When people would be taking pictures and saying, "Why are they?" I remember interviewing Bob Gainey the night they had that captain's night at the Bell Center a couple of years ago, and he said when he first took over as GM, one of the things that surprised him is that the players never went out anymore. And he said, "I didn't know if it was because they didn't want to go out or because they couldn't go out." And he says, then I realized they felt that they couldn't go out because 3 or 4 Habs players now out in a bar having a beer. Somebody takes a picture. It's on social media. Canadians are losing because the guys are out drinking, and it becomes a whole mess. Whereas back in the day, Rick, I remember back in those days, I was a single guy out on Bishop and Crescent Street. You'd see the Habs out all the time, and it was no big deal. It was sort of cool. Hey, there's Rick Green. There's Chris Nyland. There's the guys having fun. And nobody made a big deal out of it. It shows you how times have changed since then.
And the bag phones that we used to use, you couldn't be carried as a portable.
That's right.
Yeah, that too. I'll show some love to the Arturi Lehkonen goal, but I think I watched that from home. We all know the one that was scored on Saint Jean Baptiste that led to the Canadiens going to the Stanley Cup final. For a lot of people of my generation who have not seen the Canadiens make a Stanley Cup final, that is going to mean the world to them. That's going to mean a lot to a lot of people. But for me, I was a big fan of the Ilya Kovalchuk experience with the Montreal Canadiens, and seeing him score that overtime winner against the Toronto Maple Leafs. He can say for the rest of his life he was a part of the Canadiens-Leafs rivalry, and he scored an overtime winning goal, and then he points to his family up in the box. And I think up until the playoffs last year, that was the loudest I had ever heard the Bell Center for anything. And I know I've only been around the team maybe like the last 3-4 years, but like that was something that I guess will always stick to me as like a personal favorite thing to have seen up close. And then talking to Ilya Kovalchuk at his stall and asking him about the standings at that point. Because the Canadiens, I think, well, this was obviously before the pandemic took over and before the bubble. I think at that point, like the Canadiens put themselves within like a fighting chance of making the playoffs. Like it was plausible that if they went on a run, they could at least fight for that chance to make the playoffs. So things were pretty positive at that point. And then we all know how the rest of 2020 went. But still, that was fun.
I wonder if you did this 10, 15 years from now, Julian, on this show, and you asked a similar question with guys all in your age group, I imagine most of them, their memory would be from last year's Stanley Cup run, because that's the only, I said, I was spoiled as a kid. The Stanley Cup was something that happened every year. For your generation, this was like, hopefully not a once in a lifetime experience, but could be for your generation of fans.
It's true. I'll say this though, in 10, 15 years, if I'm still doing the show and that's the memory for a lot of people, hey, I've got a good feeling Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon are probably not still doing the job with the Montreal Canadiens. Let us know in the comment section what your all-time favorite Canadiens moment is or are, if you have multiple moments. Subscribe to Hockey Inside Out on YouTube. Subscribe to the Hockey Inside Out newsletter, and visit hockeyinsideout.com for full episodes.